Randall Woodfield, the I-5 killer. In 1974, the Green Bay Packers used their 17th round draft pick on a wide receiver out of Portland State named Randall Woodfield. He was tall, athletic, and had just wrapped up a productive college career. Green Bay brought him to training camp, gave him a look, and then cut him before the regular season. What they didn't know was that they had just sent home a future serial killer. After football, Woodfield began a violent crime spree along the West Coast that would stretch across multiple years. Initially responsible for a string of robberies and assaults, his crimes escalated quickly. By the late 1970s, he was dubbed the I-5 killer, targeting victims in cities along the Interstate 5 corridor, from California to Washington. Authorities eventually linked Woodfield to as many as 44 murders. He was convicted of one in 1981 and sentenced to life in prison, but he is suspected in dozens more. The number remains disputed, but his trail left behind one of the largest and most disturbing victim lists associated with any American criminal. Today, he's serving multiple life sentences in Oregon. His name rarely comes up in football history, but he remains, without question, the darkest individual ever to be drafted into the NFL. Chuck Hughes' only in-game fatality. On October 24th, 1971, during a late-season matchup between the Detroit Lions and the Chicago Bears, 28-year-old wide receiver Chuck Hughes lined up for what would be the final play of his life. With just over a minute remaining in the game, Hughes collapsed to the turf between plays. At first, players thought he was faking or cramping. Then, they saw him convulsing. The Lions team doctor and a Bears team physician rushed onto the field. So did an ambulance. As medics worked on him in front of 54,000 fans, players from both teams dropped to one knee. The stadium fell silent. His teammates stood around him in shock, praying. The image of Bears linebacker Dick Butkus waving frantically for help over Hughes' body remains one of the most haunting sights in NFL history. Hughes was rushed to Henry Ford Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. The cause: a heart attack brought on by undiagnosed arteriosclerosis. His left coronary artery was 75% blocked. Amazingly, and almost unthinkably by today's standards, the game resumed after Hughes was taken off the field. The final minute was played out as though nothing had happened. To this day, Chuck Hughes is the only NFL player to die on the field during a game. The Lions retired his number, 85, and honored him privately, but the moment remains a grim outlier in league history. Jaguars Axe Incident, 2003. When Jack Del Rio took over as head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2003, he wanted to build a culture of toughness and perseverance. As part of that, he introduced a motivational prop in the locker room, a tree stump and a real wood-cutting axe. The slogan was simple: keep chopping wood. Players were encouraged to take swings at the stump as a symbolic reminder to stay focused and persistent. Then, it backfired, literally. Punter Chris Hansen, participating in the team's new tradition, took a swing at the stump, missed, and drove the blade into his own leg. The injury was severe enough to require surgery and ended his season. For a team already struggling, losing a punter in a non-football accident was as surreal as it was preventable. The axe was removed from the locker room immediately. Del Rio, trying to downplay the incident, reportedly joked that he'd find a new slogan, but the damage was done. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Kevin Allen, crack habit and prison sentence. In 1985, the Philadelphia Eagles used the 9th overall pick on offensive tackle Kevin Allen out of Indiana. He was big, powerful, and expected to anchor the offensive line for years. But within a season, it was already clear something was wrong. Allen struggled badly as a rookie. He couldn't keep up with pass rushers, missed assignments regularly, and was labeled one of the worst picks in team history. Eagles head coach Buddy Ryan was famously blunt about him, saying Allen was a nice guy, but he's got no athletic skills. Then came the off-field collapse. Allen tested positive for cocaine and was banned from the NFL for drug use. Not long after, things got even darker. In 1987, he and a friend were charged with sexually assaulting a woman in a New Jersey hotel room. Allen was convicted as an accomplice and sentenced to 15 years in prison. He served nearly half that sentence before being paroled. He attempted a football comeback years later in the World League, but his name had already become synonymous with disaster. O.J. Murdoch, suicide at Titans camp. O.J. Murdoch never played a single down in the NFL, but he was still under contract when his life came to a tragic end. An undrafted wide receiver out of Fort Hays State, Murdoch had bounced around colleges before finally breaking through with a standout senior season. The Tennessee Titans signed him in 2011, and though he spent his rookie year on injured reserve, the team brought him back the following summer for training camp. He never showed up. On July 30th, 2012, just days before camp, police in Tampa, Florida, found Murdoch unresponsive in his car, parked outside the gates of Middleton High School, where he had once starred as a prep athlete. He had died by suicide from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Murdoch was 25 years old. The Titans were stunned. Teammates had expected him to compete for a spot on the roster. No public signs pointed to what he was going through. His death served as a painful reminder of the mental and emotional struggles some players face in silence. Brian Pata, still unsolved murder. Brian Pata was supposed to be in the NFL. The 22-year-old defensive lineman was a senior at the University of Miami in 2006 and widely projected as a mid-round draft pick. At 6 feet 4 inches, 280 pounds, he had started 3 years for the Hurricanes. Known for his strength, intensity, and leadership, he had already declared for the NFL draft and was months away from achieving a lifelong dream. On the night of November 7, 2006, just hours after practice, Pata was gunned down in the parking lot of his apartment complex in Kendall, Florida. He was shot in the head at close range. No witnesses came forward, no surveillance footage was ever found, and no arrests were made. The case went cold for 15 years. Then, in 2021, police arrested Rashawn Jones, a former Miami teammate of Pata. Investigators believed Jones, who had a history of conflict with Pata, had been harboring resentment over playing time and a shared romantic interest. Despite prior interviews and denials, new witness statements and cell phone records helped lead to the indictment. But as of today, the case has not yet gone to trial. The murder remains unresolved in the eyes of the law. Devon Bess, police standoff. Devon Bess built a reputation as a reliable slot receiver during his time with the Miami Dolphins. Undrafted out of Hawaii in 2008, he carved out a steady 6-year NFL career, catching over 300 passes and becoming a key piece of Miami's offense. His story was supposed to be one of resilience, from a troubled youth to NFL success. But after leaving the league in 2013, everything changed. In January 2014, Bess was arrested at a Florida airport after a bizarre incident in which he removed his shirt, danced wildly, and shouted at law enforcement. He was held for a psychiatric evaluation, and concerns began to mount about his mental health. A few months later, he was arrested again in Arizona after barricading himself in his car during a police standoff. According to reports, Bess had posted erratic and disturbing images on social media in the hours leading up to the standoff. When officers arrived, he refused to comply, locked himself in his vehicle, and remained inside for several tense hours. Eventually, he was taken into custody without incident. After that, Bess vanished from the football world. Mike Cawson, sex addiction, rehab, and arrest. Mike Cawson had a short and largely unremarkable NFL career as a tight end. He bounced between the Jaguars, Bills, and Redskins from 2010 to 2015, mostly serving as a backup and battling repeated knee injuries. But what made Cawson a national headline years later had nothing to do with football, and everything to do with what came after. In 2014, Cawson began dating country singer and actress Jana Kramer. The two quickly married and became a high-profile couple in entertainment circles. But behind the public appearances, their relationship was falling apart. In 2016, Cawson entered rehab for sex addiction after admitting to repeatedly cheating on Kramer, reportedly with dozens of women. The couple separated, reconciled, and later released a book detailing their turbulent marriage, which included multiple relapses, broken trust, and therapy attempts. Their personal life became highly public, with Cawson often portrayed as the villain in the story. Then, in 2021, Kramer filed for divorce, citing infidelity and emotional abuse. Cawson was later arrested for violating a protection order filed against him by Kramer, further darkening an already painful narrative. Johnny Jolly, codeine trafficking charges. Johnny Jolly was once a rising star on the Green Bay Packers defensive line. A 6th-round pick in 2006 out of Texas A&M, he worked his way into the starting lineup by his second season. At 6 feet 3 inches, 325 pounds, Jolly was a disruptive force in the middle of the defense, known for clogging running lanes and bringing an edge to the Packers' front. By 2009, he was considered a key piece of Green Bay's future. But behind the scenes, Jolly had developed a serious addiction to codeine, commonly mixed with soda and candy into a drink known as purple drank. In 2008, he was arrested in Houston for possession of over 200 grams of codeine. While awaiting trial, he kept playing, but in 2010, the NFL suspended him indefinitely. That same year, he was arrested again, this time with over 600 grams of liquid codeine, and charged with felony possession with intent to distribute. He was convicted and sentenced to 6 years in prison in 2011. He served nearly 2 years before being released on early parole. Incredibly, Jolly made a brief comeback with the Packers in 2013 and played in 8 games. But a neck injury ended his return, and he never appeared in the league again. Tom McCale, painkiller overdose and CTE. Tom McCale played 9 seasons in the NFL as an offensive lineman, primarily with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He wasn't a star, but he was a grinder, smart, disciplined, and known for his toughness in the trenches. He retired in 1995, seemingly ready to move on from football. But football never really let go of him. After retirement, McCale began struggling with chronic pain. The hits he'd absorbed over nearly a decade had taken a toll, and to cope, he turned to prescription painkillers. Over time, the usage turned into dependency. He began doctor shopping, mixing medications, and losing control. His personal life unraveled. He entered rehab, but relapsed multiple times. On May 25, 2008, Tom McCale was found dead in a friend's home in Florida. The cause was an accidental overdose of oxycodone, cocaine, and alcohol. He was 45 years old. After his death, his brain was examined by researchers at Boston University. The diagnosis, CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. His widow, Lisa, became one of the early voices in the movement to raise awareness about head trauma in football. She later took a leadership role with the Concussion Legacy Foundation, advocating for player safety and research. Barry Bennett, murdered by his own son. Barry Bennett was a respected former defensive lineman who spent 11 seasons in the NFL, most notably with the New York Jets. A 4th-round pick out of Concordia College in 1978, Bennett carved out a solid professional career, appearing in 132 games and recording nearly 20 sacks. After football, he lived a quiet life back in Minnesota with his wife, Carol. But in August 2019, their rural home in Long Prairie, Minnesota, became the scene of one of the most disturbing stories in NFL history. The couple was found shot to death in their home, and suspicion quickly turned to someone they knew well, their 22-year-old son, Dylan Bennett. Just months prior, Barry had reportedly told authorities that Dylan had expressed homicidal thoughts and even mentioned wanting to kill his own parents while receiving mental health treatment. Despite the warning signs, Dylan was not institutionalized long-term. Investigators discovered that Dylan had stolen his parents' car and withdrawn large sums of money after the killings. He was captured in Mexico days later and extradited back to the U.S., where he was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. According to prosecutors, he shot both of his parents in the back and torso with a shotgun, then fled the state. Tony Washington, drafted despite a controversial past. Tony Washington was a physically gifted offensive tackle who stood out at Abilene Christian University for his size, technique, and relentless motor. But as the 2010 NFL draft approached, teams weren't just reviewing game tape. They were weighing a backstory that made Washington one of the most controversial prospects in recent memory. At age 16, Washington was convicted in Texas for a legal offense involving a 15-year-old who was his sister. The incident, while non-violent and involving 2 minors, resulted in Washington being required to register under the state's laws. He served his sentence and completed all legal requirements before returning to society and eventually football. Despite the incident, NFL teams knew the full story during the scouting process. Washington had been open about his past with coaches and front offices. Jimmy Hitchcock, caught in Operation Wax House. Jimmy Hitchcock once patrolled NFL secondaries with speed and intensity, suiting up for the Patriots, Vikings, and Panthers. But years after his playing days ended, he found himself at the center of a massive federal investigation. In 2009, Hitchcock was arrested and charged as part of Operation Wax House, a wide-ranging mortgage fraud and money laundering scheme. The operation uncovered a network of real estate professionals, recruiters, and straw buyers who worked together to inflate home values, falsify loan documents, and pocket millions in fraudulent mortgage proceeds. Hitchcock was one of several former athletes and public figures implicated. According to court records, Hitchcock played a role in recruiting participants and facilitating fraudulent transactions. Prosecutors allege that he helped move money through various shell companies and accounts, laundering funds from homes purchased under false pretenses. The scam affected dozens of properties in North Carolina and caused significant losses to lenders. He eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to nearly 4 years in federal prison. For many, it was shocking to see a former NFL player involved in such an elaborate financial crime. Nate Webster. Sentenced after disturbing off-field conduct, Nate Webster was known for his hard-hitting style during his time as a linebacker with the Bengals and Broncos. But after his NFL career ended, headlines about Webster took a far darker turn. In 2012, Webster was convicted on multiple charges stemming from an inappropriate relationship with a teenager. The case revealed that the girl was the daughter of a former assistant coach, and court documents detailed how Webster used threats and intimidation to maintain control over the situation. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. During the trial, prosecutors described a pattern of manipulation and emotional pressure that spanned several months. The jury found the evidence credible and damning. The judge, overseeing the case, emphasized the seriousness of the misconduct and the need for accountability, especially given Webster's status as a former professional athlete. Eugene Robinson, soliciting a prostitute the night before the Super Bowl. Eugene Robinson had built a reputation as one of the NFL's most respected veterans. A 3-time Pro Bowler and Super Bowl champion with the Packers, he was seen as a leader on and off the field. So in 1999, when he received the prestigious Bart Starr Award, given annually to the NFL player who best exemplifies outstanding character and leadership, it felt like a fitting capstone to his career. But just hours after receiving that award, Robinson was arrested in Miami for soliciting a prostitute. What made the story more surreal was the timing. It was the night before Super Bowl 33, where Robinson's Falcons were set to take on the Denver Broncos. According to police reports, Robinson approached an undercover female officer and offered her $40 for sex. He was arrested on the spot and taken into custody. The Falcons quickly posted bail to get him released, but the damage was done. The next day, Robinson played in the Super Bowl and performed poorly. He gave up a long touchdown to Rod Smith and missed key tackles throughout the game. Atlanta lost 34-19, and fans and commentators alike couldn't help but wonder whether the events of the previous night had impacted his focus. The fallout was swift. Robinson returned the Bart Starr Award, and the arrest became a permanent stain on what had otherwise been a commendable NFL career. It remains one of the most infamous personal scandals to ever unfold during Super Bowl week. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching.